about the importance of green innovation in Latin America. I'd like to invite Mr. Fernando Cassibi. He's a researcher in industrial property from INPI, and he's going to moderate the panel. Also like to invite Mrs. Vanessa Pinsky, a postdoctoral researcher from the School of Economics, Management and Accounting from the University of São Paulo. And finally, Mr. Henrique Pacini from UNCTAD. At the end of each panel, we are going to have time for questions from our attendees. We ask you all to please send your question in through the chat function. I now give the floor to Mr. Fernando Cassibi for us to start the importance of green innovation for enterprises in Latin America. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you, all our previous speakers in our opening panel today. This launch event, well, we are all together really launching today, formally speaking, and the slide that you can see here on your screen is a great symbol of this big partnership, okay, because nothing is done in isolation. So this is a group of players who are working together in this initiative. I'd like to highlight not just the organizers, but also the national intellectual property institutes throughout Latin America who accepted to take part in this incredibly bold project, as well as the consultants who were rigorously selected to help us materialize the wishes, goals, and ambitions as far as this action is concerned. So I'd like to draw your attention to our consultants, okay, Thomas Lanza, and he's in charge of the sustainable agriculture IT segment, Ricardo Abusavi, who is in charge of solid waste management, consultant Luisa Valentin Barra is in charge of renewable energy sector, accessories, not just renewable energy, but also accessories and part of the green hydrogen value chain. So she kind of plays a double role, really very important one indeed. And Mr. Tiago Matos Moreira in charge of providing all of the support in the sort of matchmaking actions in business rounds. This project is a project funded by our INPI president, Mr. Julio Cesar Moreira, and he does so with a smile in his face. We have seen in his words, that he talked about a lot of mentorship project that helps us, assists us very much in his action, and in a perspective which is very relevant. And we need proactive, active role of the Patent Institute, and not just an expansive type role. However, it is very important to also, highlight that this would not be possible if we did not have, the support right at the start in 2020, the European Programme Plus. Those of you who do not know this program, this is really a fund. So it's a fund organized, managed by the European Commission, and they have some delivery agencies, and one of them is ECLAC, which has shown to be a great partner together with the European program and other partners just as important, such as our own ministry, okay, who actually joined us in this effort. We also have had a lot of women who have joined us in this project, seriously capable women. And this is important for us to mention because this action is going to pay special attention to gender balance. So we are going to strive to achieve this, balance, that sort of look at the companies that have female representatives that can actually take part in these showcases, for instance. And I'd like to mention some names. They're not all the names, okay, but there are some names that I need to mention, which are very important. So Madam Mercedes Cullum from the AL-INVEST Verde for this launch event, but for the action as a whole, I'd like to highlight Camilla Grenkog from ECLAC, Masya Moreski from INPI, excellent, top-notch project study team represented by Christina Mendes, Vicente Logden, Sabrina, Rowan Lockie, who have all helped us to prepare the technological studies, allowing us to do all of this sort of survey for this type of action. And I really would like to apologize because I am kind of using my role as moderator to provide you with some announcements, really. But the most important announcement that I believe I need to tell you is that starting today on INPI, we're going to have a website with a regulation for the initiative. So for those who did not get this through our consultants or through our organizers or even us, if you've not had a registration application for the CTs and also for startup, small, medium-sized enterprises, not exclusively, but they are very much included. So please access the regulations, okay, for you to have access to these application forms, write up your interests as a technology provider, technology user, as far as the project is concerned. So I'd like to, without further ado, invite for our inaugural presentation, as it were, for panel one, Mrs. Vanessa Pinsky. She is an expert in sustainability with over 20 years experience in corporations and business consultancy and research. She is currently a consultant, lecturer, and mentor of executives, and she is also a postdoctorate researcher at FES USP and professor at FIA. She's also an external member for enterprise sustainability, and she's the top voice in sustainability for LinkedIn. It's a great pleasure to have her with us, Professor Vanessa, and throughout this panel, we'll provide you with some other relevant information.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Fernando. It is my pleasure to be here with you. Good morning, everyone, to all officials and participants. Well, this is a very important event. One thing that highly motivated me in accepting this invitation to participate is to be able to have an organized dialogue with you. I'm going to select a few challenges and opportunities regarding the innovation system driven for sustainability from the government perspective, from startups and academia perspective. So to give you an overview of the market in the context of the planetary crisis, green innovation, and then I'm going to address challenges and opportunities. And in order to begin by providing a context, let me discuss the concept of planetary health. Even though this concept is a new concept, even though there are some people working on it, this is very important for policymakers. The concept is that planetary health is based on global environmental change as a determinant of human health. So when we speak about green innovation, we're talking about reducing environmental impact, but we cannot lose sight of the fact that we are talking about issues that have an impact on human health and well-being. And some entities have been forgetting about this in international negotiations on climate. The question why we are negotiating issues such as decarbonization that is seen as a humanitarian crisis and an unprecedented economic crisis. This concept was proposed in 2017 by UN researchers, and people started to look at the different problems in the planet in a cross-sectional way. We can no longer speak about these problems in isolation: the economic agenda, the health agenda, biology, and other areas, which are in fact cross-sectional. So we have research groups that see the impact on the planet and its impact on human health and well-being. So this is the concept. Today, we are around 8 billion people in the planet, with an expectation of reaching 10 billion people by 2050. And this great demographic growth will increase the consumption demand and the environmental impact. Today, we don't have the technology with exponential capacity to meet the growing demands with the increased demographics. So we have environmental impact and issues related to social agendas, such as guaranteeing food safety and security. So the concept of systems and the complex system problems permeate the sustainability focus. The impact we have on the environment today with increased global pollution, loss of biodiversity, altered geochemical cycles, land use and land cover change, they all lead to problems related to climate change, climate extremes, and the scarcity of natural resources. The impact we cause on the planet has a direct impact on food production, on the quality of the air, leading to respiratory problems, access to drinking water, the increased number of infectious diseases. So we need a cultural change and new business models that are scalable and disruptible. So again, we have the technological development agenda based on a disruptive technology that will look at the reduced impact in the way how the industrial system is based on the system and the increased impact related to the increased demographics. To do so, we need governance at different levels because at the end of the day, this impact has a cause and effect and has an impact on human health and well-being. So here we're talking about nutrition, infectious diseases, especially tropical diseases. We have the problem of chikungunya and dengue fever. There is an increase in non-communicable diseases because of the chemical pollution, such as diseases related to hormones, thyroidal hormones, and so on. And we also have an impact on mental health because of physical issues, because of climate extremes that have a direct impact on the more vulnerable populations, and the mental health crisis resulting from all that was worsened by the COVID-19 pandemic. One of the greatest problems we have in the sustainable development agenda in the world is the climate emergency. Now I'd like to share a few pictures to show you how close it is to us. These are pictures from an unprecedented extreme climate situation we had in the São Paulo region with torrential rains lasting 12 hours, so that the climate system was not able to predict this humanitarian catastrophe that is ongoing because communities are still landless, with lack of access to drinking water in a very complex situation. So when we talk about increased emissions caused by productive processes that are based on fossil fuel burning and other sectors such as cattle and other carbon intensive sectors, they demand disruptive technological innovation to be able to bring solutions that will decarbonize our economy for health reasons, for reasons of losses and humanitarian crisis. In the context of the green patents, the issue of decarbonization has a great sense of urgency. So I'm going to show you some data regarding the presence of carbon in the atmosphere. Of the emitted carbon, 30% lasts millions of years to be absorbed in the atmosphere. 40% takes hundreds of years, and 30% takes up to 30 years. So if we become a negative emission country, a net zero, the planet temperature will keep increasing and the extreme climates, droughts, floods, and so on, will keep increasing inequalities and poverty all over the world with great losses. So the sense of urgency is not addressed in terms of the ambitions of countries and of companies thinking about decarbonizing their actions. That's why the green patent has a critical role as a solution that will encourage decarbonization with low carbon intensive technologies and other environmental impacts. So in the context of innovation, there are a number of concepts. I don't want to make academic definitions now, but whether we are talking about the grain innovation process with the sustainable innovation, eco-innovation, low carbon technology, circular economy, or eco-design, all that is related to a single objective, and that is to reduce the environmental impact. The social agenda is connected because a transition to a low carbon economy should be driven by a fair transition. So all these aspects about how to foster this and the circular economy is an important driver in the sustainability focused innovation. And it is a driver for companies that are leading the agenda to work with innovation segments based on the decarbonization of our economy. So the green patent context is here, and this is where we need to work both in government and non-government sectors, private initiative, startups, the academia, and civil society. We demand a collective action to all that to find solutions for problems that don't have a solution right now. So the environment that favors open innovation benefits from a perspective of collective action to find the technological innovations in an experimental manner, in a trial and error attempt to give scale for the innovations. And there are a number of challenges and opportunities that familiar today is not the new name of sustainability, in fact, but it is a different perspective, a different approach that looks at risks and opportunities in a business environment related to social governance and environmental pillars. So when we speak about ESG, we're talking about business strategies in the long term. And this is totally related to the company's perception and ability to map risks. And from these risks, how they intend to mitigate the risks and include the risk in a virtuous cycle of sustainable business. The ESG agenda is not philanthropic. It is not an agenda for companies to give up return on investment or profitability. On the contrary, it is agenda that is about making money, doing the right things with a low social and environmental impact, bringing sustainable innovation into a virtuous cycle, contributing to sustainable development. It is important to remember that besides the ESG agenda, it is also related to the regulatory framework that is emerging in Brazil and in the world, thanks to regulations in the national financial system in Brazil, in B3 or the SEC in the United States, and in the past month for non-tariff barriers. So, as a regulatory environment emerges, different sectors, uh, pressure is put on different sectors, especially exporting sectors, to create a virtual cycle related to a decarbonization agenda, monitoring very complex value chains in areas regarding environmental conservation, forests, etc., as is the case of the non-tariff barrier regulation in the European Union regarding products and commodities coming from deforestation areas. Trademarks and patents are included there. Companies are challenged and they require the collaboration of startups. This is the ESG framework, and I'd like to address the environmental components now. For those of you who are working in the green innovation environment, especially people in the academia and startups, it's very important to understand where the environmental components of ESG are so that we know where the business collaboration opportunities lie. When we speak about environmental components in the ESG agenda, we are speaking about systems, but not only that. Financial system, capital markets, and other international rankings that evaluate the environmental risks of companies based on the use of natural resources, consumption of energy and water, impact on the natural capital, biodiversity as a business opportunity, and in particular, related to the impacts related to pollution, emissions, and climate risk. This is the priority agenda. In the discussion of green patents, when we look at this agenda analyzing the ESG risk, this is a business opportunity agenda because understanding the impact of companies regarding these topics, our innovative capacity in the eco-innovation environment that has emerged in Brazil for some time, we can see this as the opportunity of green technology development, how to reduce the consumption of water and energy, how to reduce the impact in the value chain. This agenda is not ready. Solutions are not there. In some sectors, we have seen that the environment of green techs has increased, especially in the agribusiness, and everything is in a virtual cycle. So, in the pressure of the market and the impact of the regulatory framework, so that companies are involved somehow, and they need technological development to address these problems. This is an example of a framework that the international market sees when they look in the organization and they look for the ESG risk. What are the main themes? Even though we don't have a standard ESG framework, some themes are related to climate change, natural capital, pollution and waste. This is very important. This is a critical problem for us. We are living a tsunami of waste, producing chemical pollution and environmental problems. And the capital market, in the perspective of this company, uh, this looks at environmental opportunities. So if it is a high carbon intensive company, that is not opportunity to clean tech opportunities and green opportunities in the area of renewable energy or other areas. It's a company that may have a risk of an investment and credit concession in the financial market, because it's a company that is part of the problem, that does not understand its impact, and is not looking at how to mitigate the impact. So if we ask, do you want to be part of the problem or the solution of the planetary crisis as a business strategy? We are always looking at the business strategy. So I will bring the example of the Fleury group. This is a group of clinical exams, a laboratory, and it's a group that has a very high maturity in the ESG agenda. Here we can see the main risks. In this laboratory, we have toxic emissions, toxic waste, and carbon emissions. We can see they are priorities. These are the most important themes regarding the impact. And the virtuous example I want to share with you is that last year, they opened registration for 10 startups. It was focused on challenges. The group of Fleury knows exactly what their social environmental problems are and the demands in governance improvements. So each one of these areas that they call challenges, and you have the link here, they discuss where they want to invest. A large company today is a highly bureaucratic. It has no appetite for risk. And all that is what a startup environment has. So the combination of a large company that wants to reduce its environmental impact with the alliance with a startup looking for solutions for the environmental problems created by this large company, looking at the impact of the company or related to operational costs for environmental management reasons. This is a huge business opportunity. And this is where green patents fit in. From the university perspective, yes, I know I have only 30 seconds. So from the point of view of universities and research institutes, what I hear from these players is the challenge of how to take the research agenda from the university benches. Because if research stays here and doesn't go to the market, so how can players from the private sector, universities and research institute can improve their collaboration and work collectively to find solutions, green patents? So to conclude, when we speak about ESG, we are talking about innovation, we're talking about collaboration, and here I listed 4 major pillars. There are the great pillars where company need support to find solutions for environmental impact: sustainable products, energy efficiency, waste management, and sustainable value chain. So thank you. It was my pleasure. Thank you, Fernando, and everybody else for the opportunity to share my market view with you. Thank you, Vanessa, for sharing your thoughts with us. This was very interesting in terms of raising awareness to technologies, including green innovation, green patents for startups, small and medium-sized companies, as well as large companies. You gave us food for thought, so thank you very much. Without further ado, I'd like now to invite Mr. Henrique Pacini, who is an economist from the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. He's a member of the Leadership of Sustainable Manufacture Program and Environmental Program. I hope I translated well. Henrique has a background in economics from the São Paulo University, so he's a colleague of Professor Pinsky. He's a master in European Studies from Hochschule Bremen and a PhD in technology from KTH Sweden. He has a postdoctoral scholarship from Harvard University and has a number of articles on the environment, trade, and development. So it is my pleasure to welcome Henrique here. Henrique, you have 20 minutes, please. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you for the invitation. I can see there are several companies present here and service providers participating. I enjoyed Vanessa's presentation very much. I'm not going to be as eloquent as she was, but I'll share with you a practical view of our work at UNCTAD, which is a trade agency from the United Nations. And I have an environment team that is working on the sustainable manufacture and environmental pollution since 2016, or officially 2019. Then has put money in the fields and in the multilateral fora to deal with industrial and plastic problems. I'd like to share my slides to show you concrete examples of what I'm talking about. SMEP works in sub-Saharan Africa as well as in South Asia. But we are going to expand to the Asia Pacific. And unfortunately, we are in Latin America, but the problems found in those regions are similar to the problems in Latin America and Brazil. So some basic data. SMEP program has 26 million pounds from the British government. It is focused in Africa and Asia, and it is divided in two fronts: plastic pollution and industrial pollution. We have projects commissioned for the textile sectors, tannery, foods and beverages, and battery recycling. The idea of the project is to prevent pollution from occurring and avoiding pollution in sectors connected to international markets, such as textiles. So we have projects in the field and dialogues with multilateral processes, such as groups of governments that are negotiating treaties against plastic pollution. So we tried to create a kind of connection between field projects. I'm going to show you in a minute. For example, and also multilateral conventions such as Basel Convention, everything related to health requiring faster changes. And there is a strong connection between the productive system, pollution, and health. And maybe this connection is not sufficiently explored because it is multidimensional, but the air pollution is related to life expectancy, for example. The more the pollution, the lower the life expectancy. This is an example of a forum that discussed oceans and depollution and renewable energies. On the left, you can see a recent meeting in the Basel Convention in Geneva discussing the issue of the world trade of plastic waste, which is also important for Latin America, as there is plastic trade everywhere. This chart is produced by our project to give you a macro idea of the opportunities, because there are so many opportunities for the private sector to engage in the depollution. What do I mean by that? We made a mapping for Uganda and Kenya. We mapped the economic sectors according to the weight of the economic sector in exports, metals, chemicals, and other sectors. And we tried to link these sectors to the related pollutants. The greatest pollutant of the economy is water discharge because of solid waste and chemicals, which is present in different economic sectors, in the timber industry, food, whatever, but also in the soil and air and other kinds of pollution as well. So we all know pollution is there, but there are many ways to control that pollution. And on the right-hand side, you can see a number of private sector solutions, such as membrane process, anaerobic, aerobic processes, chemical precipitation, solutions that can be used in the industry, for example, when you have clean water coming out. And very few places have these systems today because the consequences of putting degraded water back to the urban network or the environment, the consequences are not as severe as they should be. This is a picture of a tannery that I visited recently in Nairobi. And that is very common to see. Tanneries are famous because of the high pollution footprint, especially chemical pollution. This is another tannery for wet blue and chromium, generating chromium 6, which is so dangerous. But there are many other lines of work to address industrial pollution. And I'm going to focus on a specific sector, which is plastics. There are several projects ongoing, and we have a multilateral work in this area, especially in terms of substitutes.
So what we call plastic substitutes, the several different commercial possibilities for industrial property and intellectual property. Plastic substitutes are materials, non-plastic substitutes that work and function as plastics. And the alternatives to plastic are better plastics, plastics made with renewable biomass, or plastics which biodegrade. I listed here, it wasn't by coincidence that a water filter made of porcelain. I thought to myself, in Accra and Nairobi and Lagos in Nigeria, South Africa, for example, and Laos, all the countries that I visited, and through the projects, plastic pollution is huge. You no longer see these kinds of systems for water treatment, simple water treatment with simple innovation, like terracotta filters, for example, that used to furnish safe water. They were simple solutions. And without plastics today, unfortunately, clean water is correlated to plastic bottles in most places in the world, especially places where water transmission systems don't guarantee sanitation, don't guarantee people's health. So the substitute materials that substitute and replace plastics, for example, natural materials like cotton, fibers, agricultural fibers, algae, marine substitutes, for example, that present a major potential, great potential, economic potential. We've mapped recently 232 different materials that can replace plastics, which are currently transitioned in terms of world trade, transacted rather. This is an example of the water which comes out of one of the tanneries that I visited. I thought that it would illustrate in Pakistan, Lahore. Many people here from the webinar may be using items that are manufactured in Pakistan and Lahore, either textiles or leather objects, but these industrial processes that we as consumers, we lose the information how this was produced. There's no passport for a product that shows where it came from, the product, where it came from, if it was produced with resulting in clean or polluted water. And this water on the right hand, it looks clear, it was treated, but it's still not exactly like the water that entered into the factory initially. Incoming water. This is a picture that I took in Lahore, Pakistan, in the factory they produce for Levi's jeans, especially. And you can see that there are various different types of pollutants here, solid waste, which is recaptured and used for production of fibers as a recycled material, which is an interesting solution. This is a photograph in Accra in Ghana. You can see this kind of scene, probably for view in Latin America, of course, in Brazil, even in Brazil, and it shows the problem of plastics contaminations, which are concentrated in rivers, river basins, especially rios and estuaries. And this is a kind of equipment, which is also a business opportunity, which traps the plastic floating on the rivers before it comes out into the ocean in the opposite direction. Coming on high tides, it captures the plastic which comes from the oceans into the estuaries and rivers. So it's collected and processed in a recycling factory outside of Accra, Ghana. This is a factory, especially where women work separating out the packaging and polypropylene and PET bottles. It's this kind of work, which it's important work, it's extremely important, but here also is a manifestation of the wrong kind of system. We're using plastics. It's uncontrolled, the plastic, a water filter, perhaps to avoid this kind of need. You also have bottlenecks where a lot of the bottles are not processed because you have limitations and the capacity for the country, the speed of the accumulation of the country to release machinery to process these. And something that's interesting in most of the plastics which are collected in Accra and Ghana in several different countries are actually, it used to be that until a few years ago, there was eco-dumping, especially to Asia, eco-dumping, where North America and Europe dumped plastic waste to Asia to be processed, and oftentimes contaminated. They're not processed, they're not recycled. They end up becoming another source of pollution. Today, it's interesting to note that a lot of plastic waste is captured in Africa and exported to Europe to do things like polyester shirts or materials which have a recycled seal or stamp, which is a standard, private standards. Voluntary standards or mandatory standards are becoming more and more common here in Europe. So this creates a higher demand for plastic recycled pellets, which causes a reversal of the trade flow from the south to the north. Some of insights, visual insights, you can see that this machine here is extremely necessary for any kind of recycling operation. You have to have kind of plastic flakes to wash it or sell it. It's difficult for you to get this kind of machinery in the places today, and some of the countries in Latin America have these problems as well. And this is the case of Ghana. This is an imported machine from China, but it depends and requires improvisation to function. You can see that the flakes, and it's very difficult for you to find a technician, a person that's trained and skilled, having been trained or having practiced in a company that specializes in these kind of recycling machines, which allow the circularity. So there's a lot of improvisation, which generates higher costs and higher accidents and risks in these sectors. This is another project of ours in Lagos, Nigeria. It's a modular plastic processing, 40 feet long with solar energy, because the electricity is not reliable, so you have to have a solar energy. So it's an opportunity for intellectual property, which each load of plastics coming from the community, they map the districts in Lagos which furnish this plastic material and how much was paid to the person that sold the plastic and the distance, the weight of the material, and they enter into a digital ledger where you can create a passport for the product saying that this ton of flakes, plastic flakes, came from such and such places. It was produced in this way with this carbon footprint, and it's a component of a product passport which helps in the future. I think this is going to reach the consumers to have a better view, a reverse view of where things came from. This view we're blind as to where these products that we consume came from. And why am I saying this? Because why it's important? Why should companies care about this, especially in the plastic industries? It has to change. The countries are negotiating, creating a treaty against plastic pollution. And there's several different instruments to reduce the use, the production, exportation, and use of certain types of plastics in different ways. This is going to involve truly a sandwich of materials and licenses, quotas, perhaps bans at the level of trade and also at the national levels, for example, taxes on use or producers' responsibility, as Vanessa quoted, design standards, for example, more requirements for monomaterials, simple materials that can be recycled, whether in Ribeirão Preto in Santiago or in Nairobi. Today, these standards are broken down and fragmented. Something can be processed in São Paulo, sometimes can't be processed in Buenos Aires. And this causes problems in terms of pollution, urban pollution. And these, I'm already concluding, Fernando, okay, these requirements that are being addressed multilaterally are going to force different models of delivery, of function, perhaps not via plastic bottles or bags or materials, replacement, substitute materials. I call your attention to that we can see in the end of the recent report that mapped substitute materials that replace plastics transitioned in or transacted in trade. Most of them are materials and not products, but it's already a large market. $88 billion, for example, ceramics and metals, agricultural waste, for example. This is important for Latin America, and all of these substitutes are oftentimes taxed at the border as export products higher than plastic. So this is something that the governments have to correct and not let the bad become more expensive. You have to tax plastics more and substitutes less. This would facilitate the replacement. For example, this is something that can be done with algae, something that can be done with straw or bagasse. Sugarcane bagasse is a good example, and it's almost totally circular in the sugarcane industry, but there's several other different crops that still don't have this reuse of the waste. All plant fiber, there's a high demand for it. In Switzerland, almost all the glasses, the cups are made out of banana or bagasse or other materials. Banana fiber can be used. Of course, this requires capital. This requires intellectual property and investment, of course. Then also there are fish nets, which are polluters in the oceans, but can be done biodegradably. Here, believe it or not, we have a project working on this already, and it works for smaller fish nets and for different traps, for example, fish traps. This is my last slide. This is a point that echoes because Vanessa says it's important that to make money combined with sustainability. Why not return to models and trade models without packaging, like bulk with the cloak of modernity, for example, the digital framework. There's a report by a partner NGO here, which looked at this recently, and it's something that I also observed. For example, people in Brazil, I saw that Coca-Cola is coming back with the returnable bottles, and this becomes a circular system. It's difficult to get the bottles initially to trade them in or turn them in, but the returnable bottle has a cost less than a single-use bottle, and this is essential for prices to give this message to the consumer for this kind of solution. There are some solutions, some suggestions here with the focus of reuse, substitute materials. All of this has intellectual property, great intellectual property footprints, business models, new business models have companies like the company in Chile, which are just a packageless product. This go back to the past with a cloak of modernity, but with a lower intensity of pollution of waste in the world. So I apologize for having gone over my time. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much to Fernando, Cassibi for the invitation. Thank you very much, Henrique. Your presentation was very inspiring and truly to add it to Professor Vanessa's Pinsky's talk. We realize how diverse the world is, but with huge creative potential. It called my attention to realize that UNCTAD has a very interesting side, which also is a think tank, is for studies and repository of studies and projects and research, which is very interesting. And the studies can be used and should be used by decision makers in the public sector for their domestic policies. So thank you very much for calling attention to that. And I would like to call attention not only to the government policymakers, but also you've pursued actively, increasingly through universities, research and development institutes, and by companies, all of them together in the national system for innovation. We can observe these issues. I don't see any questions from the audience, so actually, I would like to thank both of the speakers for having accepted the invitation to share their expertise in the opening panel. It was essential in terms of awareness raising, information, awareness raising. And I believe it's going to open up, it's going to echo considerably the following panels, with the following panels. So hence, I adjourn this current panel. Before, I'd like to make an announcement about the importance of the organization and action in the business round. Decided that the matchmaking, the second activity, which should actually be a series of dialogues in financing in green innovation that we're coordinating together with the Center for Management and Strategic Studies, will actually have been done later after the showcases and the business rounds, according to a logic of follow-up and a strategic logic and follow-up of the results from the business rounds. Thank you very much to both speakers. We have run out of time, unfortunately, and we'll move on to the MC, Isabella. Turn the floor back to Isabella Borsani. Okay, fine. Returning, I would like to thank, first of all, the words and inspiration from Vanessa and Henrique, and having been chaired by Fernando Cassibi, I'd like to thank our audience as well, frequently sending in praise for this event and inspired as well by the presentations done by Vanessa and Henrique. Before we turn on to the next, move on to the next panel, like some people have asked about the availability of the recordings. We're going to be sending subsequently after we edit the material, we're going to send them to the emails for people who signed up for the event, the recording of the event. So we'll move